Welcome to the Workplace Minute, powered by H3HR Advisors and sponsored by Paychex, and also sponsored by WorkHuman. My name is Steve Boese. Return to office mandates hit employees with disabilities the hardest. On January 20th, wasting little time during his first 24 hours in office, President Donald Trump issued a memorandum terminating federal remote work arrangements for millions of government employees. It was a positive move to many of Trump's corporate supporters, many of whom have rolled out their own in-person work requirements over the past year. Return-to-office mandates, paired with dramatic cuts to the federal workforce, have been praised by in-person work proponents as wins for productivity and reduced spending, with portions of the employees forced to choose between in-person work or leaving their positions altogether. But few have acknowledged that the brunt of these decisions will be shouldered by already at-risk workers, many of whom are workers with disabilities. Federal government workforce has always been a place where people with disabilities have thrived because of its security and health insurance benefits, and where workers could get the accommodations that they need to be successful in the world of work. The federal government boasts the highest percentage of people with disabilities in its workforce, with state governments following closely behind. This matters because people with disabilities are in the workforce at a significantly lower rate than people without disabilities. Across all demographics, people with disabilities have lower employment rates and are much more likely to be self-employed or to take on part-time work than workers without disabilities. The pandemic era began to change things for workers with disabilities. In the 5 years since large portions of the workforce moved to work from home arrangements amid the crisis, remote work has increased the number of people with disabilities in the workforce. Employment for people with disabilities was at 22.7% in 2024, a historic high since the Bureau of Labor Statistics began tracking those numbers. Greater shares of the disabled workforce are working remotely than those without disabilities, and according to recent reports, flexible work schedules were among the most granted accommodations for workers with disabilities. The ADA, which requires employers to provide reasonable accommodations for their workers, does not specifically necessitate the option of remote work. Workers instead have argued for remote work options with their respective employers for decades. 5 years ago, as the majority of workers moved to remote work, those conversations became immeasurably easier. However, the recent wave of return-to-office mandates threatens to stall or even reverse that progress. Workers with disabilities are facing a harsher workplace reality under the narrative of the Great Return. And even as the country celebrates the 35th anniversary of the ADA this year, people with disabilities may be entering a new stretch of accessibility barriers. In 2023, as corporations like Amazon and Google shifted back to in-person work, disability rights groups argued that the shift would disproportionately impact workers with disabilities, many of whom required greater transportation and workplace accommodations. More recently, Amazon revised its disability policies, making it even more difficult for employees to receive remote work exemptions as part of disability accommodations. Disabled worker advocates warn that a broad reversal of access to remote working arrangements, coupled with the anti-DEI narrative pushed by the Trump administration, may lead to a revitalization of discriminatory or even segregationist policies that silo workers with disabilities into specific unskilled jobs, negating years of effort for them to enter the real workforce. The removal of general remote work policies may also dangerously single out employees in need of accommodations, and that will make it easier for them to be pinpointed and potentially targeted with adverse job actions. Advocates also note that the goal of strengthening workplace accommodations like remote work isn't to force everyone to follow suit, it's to offer choice and accessibility. Couched in productivity-first language, the great return to offices creates greater distrust around flexibility and employee care, and threatening to make worse misconceptions and stigmas around disabled workers as not being capable, dedicated, or as productive as non-disabled workers. The truth is, most organizations are still facing challenges in finding and retaining the workers they need, and creating additional barriers to employment for disabled workers is not the way to meet both their talent needs and to become the kind of open, accessible, and thoughtful employer all organizations claim they want to be. It would be a shame if these return-to-office mandates end up reversing the hopeful trend of increased workplace participation for disabled workers, which, to be honest, still has a long, long way to go before any of us should think it's acceptable. That's it for the show today. We will continue to follow this and all the important topics and trends in the world of work here on the HR Happy Hour Media Network. This has been Steve Boese for the Workplace Minute, powered by H3 HR Advisors.